All right, if you were involved in a construction accident, you should call an attorney, and you should call one right away, because I can assure you that the contractors have insurance companies who are informed right away about that injury, and they send investigators right away to go to those work sites and take as many statements as they can, and those statements will always magically be favorable to the insurance company and their clients. It's really important that you contact an attorney who has experience in this area, who has represented many people in construction accidents in the past, and that you do so as soon as possible to give that attorney an opportunity to contact the people on your behalf that need to be contacted and do the investigation on your behalf that needs to be done to make sure that you are properly protected and that your rights are protected so that you can get the recovery that you deserve. We see all kinds of injuries at construction sites, but the injuries at construction sites tend to be more serious due to the nature of the work and the dangers that exist at construction sites. So we see injuries from sharp objects that could even include a cutting off of limbs. We've seen people fall from heights, which result in terrible injuries to the spinal cord, whether it's some type of paralysis or whether it's herniated discs that require surgery, fractures that have required surgery with plates and screws and hardware inserted. And we've seen torn ligaments and tendons also that can require surgery in order to be addressed. So we've seen all types of injuries that take place at construction sites, but generally the injuries at construction sites can really be serious injuries due to the dangers that exist there. There are a lot of different people or entities that could be responsible for construction accidents. It depends on the facts of the circumstances. It's possible that there is a particular contractor that did something wrong or that caused your accident, but most times, there are very strict laws in the state of New York that apply to owners and general contractors at construction sites. And there are very detailed regulations that they are supposed to comply with. And very often, when you are injured at a construction site, it results from the fact that the owner or the general contractor did not comply with one of those regulations. I have seen many of these cases, all different types of fact patterns, all different types of situations. Sometimes it could be a single contractor that's responsible. Very oftentimes, it's multiple entities and companies that have failed to do what they were supposed to do that resulted in the accident. So the answer is it could be many different parties at an accident site that could be responsible for what happened, and it's important that you get a lawyer who is familiar with the law, who can investigate the facts and find out who's responsible for what happened to you and make sure that all of those people or companies are held responsible and make sure that you get the compensation that you deserve. There's a very strict law that applies at construction sites to owners and general contractors. And it's even stricter when it comes to workers who are injured as a result of gravity-related incidents. So, for example, if they fall from a height or if something falls on them. The law is very, very strict against owners and general contractors. And that results from the fact that these are common injuries that happen, and the law wants to make sure that workers are protected. They want to make sure that owners and general contractors protect their workers from those types of injuries. And so if they don't, the law says if you don't protect those workers from those type of injuries and you fail to comply with these strict set of requirements that we're telling you have to comply with, then we're going to hold you responsible. Workers who either fall from a scaffold or fall from a ladder, if they don't comply what they are supposed to comply with regard to those scaffolds or ladders or other devices too, it's not limited to those, then most of the time the owner and the general contractor can be found to be entirely at fault for that accident. And that will enable the worker to get the recovery that they deserve. If you've been involved in an accident at a construction site, you should call a lawyer to know your rights and have your rights protected. You need a lawyer who's familiar with those laws, who can find out the facts of what actually happened to you, to investigate them, figure out what happened, and see if what happened to you was caused by the owner or the general contractor or another contractor not complying with the laws they were supposed to have complied with. If in fact that is what happened and that's what caused your accident, the law can be very favorable at times for victims of negligence at construction sites. So it's really important that you call a lawyer to find out what your rights are. A good lawyer will ask you detailed questions about what happened to you at that site, detailed questions about how the accident happened, who did what, whose responsibilities were what, and find out who's responsible for what happened to you and make sure that all of those people or companies are held responsible and make sure that you get the compensation that you deserve. For most situations, the statute of limitations for a negligence claim, which includes claims for construction accidents, is 3 years. So it's 3 years from the date of the incident. There are some exceptions to that. So for example, claims against the City of New York or any city agency could be less than 3 years. Those could be a year and 90 days. Plus, claims like that also have requirements that you file a document called a notice of claim within 90 days. Somebody is injured in a construction site accident. They are entitled to recover for a number of different things, depending on the circumstances. Firstly, they can recover for what we call pain and suffering, the effect or the impact that the injuries have had on the person's life. So it might be a condition that causes them pain for the rest of their life, or it might be a condition that causes them some type of limitation, or it might be something that causes them, it affects their ability to do some of the things that they used to do. So that's what we call pain and suffering, and a person can recover for that both in the past, meaning what's happened since the accident, and also in the future going forward. There's also economic damages. So if someone is injured and that has affected their ability to work or to earn a living, that's something they can recover for as well. And again, that could be for the rest of their lives, depending on the seriousness of the injury. So that could very well be a very substantial recovery for someone who was earning a good living, especially someone at a construction site who obviously was working. They were obviously earning a living. Often they earn a good living, and especially if they're a member of a union and they're getting all types of union benefits on top of their salary. Those are all things that are recoverable for if they're no longer able to do that. And of course, there's also medical expenses. If someone needs medical care for the rest of their life, that's something they can recover for as well. And every case is unique. Every person's experience is unique. And what those person's damages are, what the impact that an accident was on that person, it's different in every case. And that's something I love to take a look at and analyze and see how the injuries and the accident affected that individual person. Because now when you go to a jury, if you have to go to a jury and when you go to a jury, there's really only one question they're going to be asked. And that's a question of how much, meaning how much is the client entitled to recover for their injuries? The amount that you are entitled to recover depends on the facts and the circumstances of the case, and it will also depend on the significance of your injuries and the impact that those injuries have had on your life. The more serious the injury, generally the greater the recovery. The greater the impact on your life, generally the greater the recovery. Somebody who has an injury that doesn't impact their ability to work will not get the same recovery as someone who has an injury that has impacted their ability to work. And somebody who has been unable to work for a few months as a result of an accident will still get a substantial recovery, but someone whose injuries are serious enough that they prevent them from ever working again will get a much more significant recovery as a result of that accident. I can say that construction accident cases tend to have more serious injuries associated with them. Construction workers or people involved in accidents at construction sites do tend to have larger recoveries because of the impacts that those injuries have on them. There is a difference between workers' compensation and what we call third-party claims. But it's very important that you be aware that you are entitled to both. So let me explain. Anyone who is injured while working on the job is entitled to collect workers' compensation in the state of New York. So if you are a construction worker and you are hurt at a construction site, you're entitled to workers' compensation. You're entitled to have your medical bills paid for the treatment that you need relating to those injuries, and you are entitled to be paid for the time that you missed from work. But in addition to that, if there is somebody other than your employer who is responsible for what happened to you, you are also entitled to make a claim against that person or entity. So very oftentimes, people who are injured at construction sites are entitled to both workers' compensation claims against their employer and third-party claims against someone else who is responsible for what happened to them, such as the owner or the general contractor. Workers' compensation is something that any worker is entitled to if they are injured on the job, and it's regardless of fault. It doesn't matter whose fault the incident was. So even if you were partially at fault or even all at fault, you are entitled to collect workers' compensation. There are other types of claims that do depend on fault, but I would suggest that you call an attorney to find out what your rights are, because there may be situations where you think you were at fault, but you may not have been, because there are really specific rules and regulations that owners and general contractors are required to comply with at work sites. And if they don't, then they are at fault, even if you are partially at fault, even if you are mostly at fault. If you were injured on a construction site Even if you are not a construction worker, you still may have rights. It's important that you call a lawyer to find out what those rights are. It's important that you have a lawyer who's experienced in these types of cases, who can ask you the right questions, find out the right details, to know what your rights are and to be able to protect you as much as possible. I've represented a number of people at construction sites who have been injured who are not construction workers and got them substantial recoveries. If someone dies at a construction site or in a construction accident, that's what we call a wrongful death claim. Survivors of that person have rights, and they are entitled to be compensated for a number of possible different things. They are entitled to recover, first of all, for what we call conscious pain and suffering, which is for the pain that the person who passed away went through before he or she died. And depending on how long it was, and depending on how much pain we can prove that person went through, sometimes those recoveries can be quite substantial. The family is also entitled to recover for what we call pecuniary loss, which is a fancy legal word that just means the economic loss that they suffered as a result of that person no longer being there. So if we have, for example, a father of 2 small children who was earning a certain amount of money every year and was supporting those children, there's a loss that those children have suffered as a result of that, and they're entitled to recover for the economic loss that they suffered as a result of that. There are other areas of loss as well that the law permits. Every area of loss that the family is entitled to recover, we are here to make sure that you can get. We represent many people who are injured at construction sites all over the city of New York and even beyond the city of New York. We represent people who are members of unions, people who are not members of unions. It happens to be that in New York City, many of the people at construction sites, particularly larger construction sites, are members of unions, but also many people are not. So we've seen them all, and we've represented all. So we are very experienced in handling these cases. We know the laws that the owners and general contractors are supposed to comply with. We know what to do when they don't. We know the types of injuries these clients suffer. We know the impact that these injuries have on their lives. We know what it means for someone who has been earning a good living and who can't do that anymore. We really want to make sure that those people, those clients, get the recovery they're entitled to. We've done it many times before, and we look forward to doing it many times again.
Hi, my name is Brian Orlow. Call me today for a free consultation.